Proverbs chapter 27 is where I want to start the conversation this morning. And you'll remember last week, I mentioned that this week, Lord willing, I'd be presenting the thought, bringing up the topic of relationships and how those can be beneficial in overcoming the lust of the flesh, the world, and the deceitfulness of the devil. And so again, this thought was a comment from the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, yes, I read the comments, and I approve most of them. Fortunately, it's been a long time since I've had to just outright delete one, but that does happen occasionally. Somebody gets absolutely just obnoxious rude. But if you leave a polite comment, even if you disagree with what I'm presenting, I'll approve it and let it show up. But leave out all the profanity and the ugliness, and your comment will probably go through. But I love the comments. I love people responding and what have you. So anyway, YouTube channel's still going well. People are still looking at it, and I haven't done anything with it this week. Obviously, too busy. But we'll see what this next week holds, and we'll see what happens there. But continue to pray for my family. My two brothers are coming in for Christmas with their kids, and one of my brothers called me yesterday, spent some time with me on the phone, asking for some big brother advice, which is encouraging. I was very much encouraged by that. Most of you know, our relationship has been somewhat strained over the years. Never was great, but it's, as far as spiritual things go, it's always been a little on the strained side. So anyway, just pray that during Christmas I'll be able to witness and be a blessing and be a help to them. And, like I said, the one called me to ask for some counsel and some help on some things, and so nothing too deep, but just worldly stuff. But that's oftentimes how you kind of break the ice and get to talk about better things. And so I'm hopeful that that might be the case. All right, verse 17, Proverbs 27, verse 17, and notice our thought for today, and it says, "And thou." Proverbs 27, verse 17. Oh, that was 27. That's why it didn't make no sense to me. "Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend." A lot of folks like this verse, use this verse. Even the world knows this verse, and they have twisted it in all sorts of ways. But here's the thing. We should be improving one another and helping one another and bettering one another. And if you're not, by spending time around other people, bettering them, sharpening them, you're wasting your influence. You're wasting your influence. Always seek to better the folks that you're around. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the great blessings you gave us last week, protection. Brother Wade's filling in, and the great message he delivered. We pray, Father, for your blessing this morning. I pray that you'd bless those that are still preparing and planning to come. I pray that you'd not allow Satan to hinder them. And Father, I pray you bless our time together now around your word, that it might be encouragement, that it might be helpful, and that, Father, we might become better at being a blessing to others in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, relationships. Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Good morning. All right, we need to fill up the right side. I told these folks on the left, I said, y'all are left-leaning, and you need to, we got too much left-leaner and central folks, walking the fence kind of. So it's good to see the right side filling up this morning. Anyway, if you don't understand me, I'm picking on folks, and it's okay. So they love me in spite of that. Relationships. How can relationships help us counteract the influence of the world, the lust of the flesh, and the deceitfulness of the devil? Let me pause before I get into anything that I've said and just see, do you have a thought this morning about that verse and how it applies to our topic? Anybody have an input right off? Okay. So we'll get into it a little bit and give you some more thought. Look at Proverbs 27, verse 9. Back up to verse number 9. It says in verse number 9, ointment and perfume rejoiceth the heart. All right, so that's, what's ointment and perfume? That's stuff you put on the outside, right? So that stuff, it rejoiceth the heart. It does affect something on the inside. Most of the time it makes me cough and sneeze. But in any case, but notice, so doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. Talking about the influence and how the influence of relationships can help us with the world, the lust of the flesh, and the deceitfulness of the devil. He says that just like, somebody walks past you, they've got some kind of perfume on, some kind of cologne on for the guys, and you go, well, that smells good. Or maybe they got a little carried away with it, Or maybe they didn't wash yesterday's off before they added some for today, and, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Just like that affects the heart, so does the relationships, the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. Sometimes your phone will ring, it'll ding, it'll go off, or maybe you're passing through Walmart or some other store, and you see somebody, or again, the phone rings or dings and a text message or a phone call. You look at it, you see who it is, you've got one or two responses. Right? It's either, oh boy, they're calling me, or it's, what do they want? Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you slide right and sometimes you slide left, right? If you got a smartphone. Sometimes you pick it up and sometimes you put it down. Why is that? Talk to me. I'm looking for a response. What is it about that person that situation that causes you to respond one way or the other?
Feeling instantly guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's like, that person complains constantly, I want to spend an hour on the phone with them.
Mm-hmm.
Or that perfume makes me want to throw up.
What's that? Well, well, in any case, let me turn this on. I don't know if this will help much, fellas, but you can tell me if it's picking anybody up, just for those on YouTube. So the phone rings, it's George, it's Mary, it's Marcia, it's Jorge, whoever it happens to be. And you're either going, wow, they thought to call me. Or you're going, what do they want? Is it not their influence on you that's either the encouragement or the discouragement, the uplift or the drag down? And it's your past experiences with them. And as Brother S.M. Davis would say, your experience is either they're a giver and when you answer the phone, it's going to give you encouragement or something, or they're a taker and it's going to drain you. They're going to require something of you. They're going to, lay something on you that is going to be a burden of some kind, right? And by the way, all relationships have some give and take, but then what we're talking about is Some are just pretty much just takers, and some are predominantly givers. And if they do need something, you don't mind at all because they've invested and given so much that, man, you're just standing ready to help them when they need, right? Any thoughts?
We didn't have that issue 25 years ago because we didn't have caller ID. When the phone rang, what did we do?
You answered it.
We didn't know who it was.
Right.
We didn't have no reaction.
Right. Initially, there was no initial.
And sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
I think people use it as a control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they know who it is. I ain't answering it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And I guess there's two sides to that deal as well, because a control, because of how easy it is these days, the communication I'm talking about, people just call it a whim. And back 25 years ago, you had to make a special effort. 45 years ago. Well, yeah, 25 years ago, the cell phones had just really started. They were around, I mean, but they weren't like today. I mean, a cell phone back then was the phone. Yeah.
Well, you didn't have, my first cell phone didn't have caller ID. I'm talking about
It-
like an answering machine.
Yeah, well, yeah, they had those as well. Sure. Yeah, so go back 40 years or 30 plus years. The phone was on the wall with one of the dials or the push button dealies.
And if we were eating supper, you didn't get up there and answer that phone.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, back then, Dad got home 10 minutes to 5 every Monday through Friday.
Right.
5 o'clock we ate.
Yeah.
The phone rung at the time we were eating, you didn't answer it.
Right. Yeah.
Don't care who it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unless you had a party line. And then you didn't want to do that because you knock everybody out, right? Some of you probably don't remember that deal. Yeah, you don't have a clue what that was. Can you imagine, listen, can you imagine picking up your phone and going to call somebody and there's already somebody on that and you're listening to both sides of the conversation? That's what it was. Yeah, you try to hang up real quiet so nobody knew that you picked up on them. But hey, listen, that was just the way it worked, right? Yeah. Oh boy, we're going back now. Yeah, I think we might have fallen away from the topic a little bit, but hey. But again, that, I suspect even in the horse and carriage days, there was this thing of when certain people approach you or communicate with you or you're around them, like I said, I included to go to the store, right, and see somebody. Because it's bigger than just the phone. People influence you. You influence people. And the relationship, all right, relationship, listen, there is a relationship between you and everybody, right? Whether you know their name, whether you know who they are or not, there's still a relationship. It's just not a very close one, right? You have a relationship with the people you pass in the car or that pass you in the car, right? And that's often a bad relationship, depending on how they do that. Miss Pat, you better straighten up. Anyway, but that relationship, any relationship, is either going to help you, strengthen you, or hinder you. And that's something that we need to reflect on. That's something we need to consider. And of course, the person that left the comment on the YouTube that I put out there as a question, they were primarily focused on close family relationship, which again, if you have a good relationship with your close family, then it's uplifting and helpful. And if you don't, it'll drag you down every time, right? It may, there are people who were raised in drug addict homes, right? Gossip homes, whatever sin you might want to name, there are folks who were raised around that, and their home life and their relationship with their close family is not helping them to avoid sin and problems and whatever it is. It's actually dragging them back into it, right? And so we're just looking into this connection of relationships and how they affect us when it comes to the flesh, the world, and the devil, right? Now understand something. If you're a parent or a grandparent here, or even if you're a young person that might become that sometime soon, you need to think about this, because once you establish your home and begin establishing your family, then you have to decide and evaluate, how do I want to be as a parent, as a grandparent, as an aunt, uncle, whatever it happens to be. So regardless of who you are or where you're at in life, even you young people need to assess the relationships and then decide which relationships are helping me and which ones are hurting me. And then with that, what influence do I want to have on the relationships that are with people, right? Because it's a two-way street, right? The person that you might cringe when they call you might cringe when you call them. Or it might be that person that, you love to hear from isn't so thrilled when you call them, right? Because this relationship is always a two-way street. You affect them, they affect you. And we need to assess that and think about that. How am I, right? Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend, right? And some people, you can take two knives and sharpen them with each other, or you can beat them up and make them dull as anything with one another, right? It's in how that relationship works and what you're doing with that, right? Any other thoughts? Okay, look at another passage. Ecclesiastes chapter 4. To the right just a little ways. Ecclesiastes chapter 4. So here's my first thought. Relationships provide encouragement and strength. Or maybe I should have said they can provide encouragement and strength, because sometimes they don't. And again, that Proverbs 27:9, ointment and perfume rejoice the heart, and so does the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. And then Ecclesiastes 4, starting in verse number 9, it says, two are better than one because they have, notice, good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. All right, and we notice in verse 10 there the improvement aspect of this. There's a benefit in verse 9 and 10. You're getting more accomplished. There's a better reward for the labor in verse 9. And in 10, if there's some kind of hindrance, some kind of challenge that befalls one of them, the other one can help them up. Verse 11, again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Right? And so again, that's talking about relationships and how they can be used to leverage situations and benefit all parties involved. And so in this thing of relationships, we have the opportunity to provide encouragement, to provide strength, to provide help in times of trouble. And what kind of friend What kind of friends are you looking for? And then what kind of friends are you going to be? What kind of relationships? I use that friend term for a relationship there, all right? Because let's face it, even a mom and a dad have the same opportunity, right? Bible talks about dads not discouraging their children, right? Not being a discouragement to them in the New Testament. So, parent-child relationship and all of that. We'll get into that more later, but maybe. Any thoughts on that? Yes, ma'am.
My mother had a friend when I was growing up. It was back in the era where mothers didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And this lady was over at the house constantly.
Mm.
And it got to the point where Mom would say, come on in here, Doris, I've got to do so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
So Mom would, do her normal stuff, and the lady would follow her. Well, eventually, my older sister was killed in a car wreck, and Mom said this lady came over every single day. Excuse me. And she said she about drove me nuts.
Mm.
But she told me, she said, no. She said, you're not going to retreat. You're going to be okay. And she said, later, she said, I don't know what I'd have done without her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. What's that?
So sometimes you don't see it as good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In retrospect, that was probably exactly what you needed
Right.
to have.
Yeah.
So a friend that is going to stick close to you,
Mm.
regardless of you're pushing them away,
Mm-hmm.
you're not listening, but they're going to stay right there. I'm not, you can be as hateful as you want, but I'm not going anywhere. And eventually you're going to see that that's exactly what you needed to have.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it me, or does it seem like we have less tolerance for people today? Yeah. I mean, if your mom had had Facebook, she might have run that gal off. Just because we have such liberty to share our emotion, and without looking people in the face, oftentimes, we get this boldness that we don't have face-to-face. And then, because of our internet connections, friends, right, which aren't really friends, just be honest. Because of those friends, it seems like friends are more not more, less valuable, right? Just thinking about your mom and your situation that you explained, that lady was there every day. Who else was there? Who else was there every day? How many other people were that close to your mom? Nobody, right? So, that prevented your mom from saying, get out of here and don't come back. Because then there would be nobody, right? Where today we have all these, and forgive me, don't be offended by this, but make-believe connections with people. They're so paper thin and so superficial, thank you for that word, that, and we just tend to cut those ties at a whim, and not realizing that at some point you're going to need that person, or you're going to realize that you needed that person, and we don't value people quite as much as we.
same with marriage. Look how fast, there's people that get married and divorced before I realize they got married. And people from my past, and you're like,
And she's probably not even talking about Hollywood people.
when did that person marry him?
Uh-huh, yeah. 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 We have cheapened the relationship word to the point that it's again, it's a trashed kind of a deal. We're a throwaway society, and I'm not just talking about paper products. It's true with relationships as well, and so we need to be very careful. In sharing our opinions and our words, because while your mom probably didn't tell her to her face that, and she wouldn't have.
No, she cared too much about it.
Right. Yeah. Obviously those in the household knew that this wasn't all good, at least the thought was, because we were more tolerant back then. The benefits came out later. The obvious benefits were not obvious until later. So let me give you another quick thought here. Hebrews 10. Let's talk about something else relating to relationships and how they're to be beneficial. Hebrews 10. And start in verse 22 there, Hebrews 10:22. It says, "Let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised." Now, obviously we're talking about having, drawing nigh to the Lord and having a stable relationship and getting close to God, and that's, of course, that's more in line with what we're talking about, where we're aiming for. Notice verse 24. Let us consider one another. There's your relationship brought in. To provoke, encourage, challenge. I'm going to put the word accountability there. Provoke unto love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. I see accountability in this passage. Right? We need other people to remind us of the other things, but the context here, verse 22 and 23, drawing near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, holding fast to the profession of our faith without wavering. And then he says in verse 24, considering one another to provoke to love and good works. The relationships that we have are what tie us to what we should be. Right? And again, yes, there's opportunity for this to go the other way, and we'll talk about that in the end, Lord willing, but it's in a positive way. Our relationships should tie us, bind us, and hold us to the things that we should be maintaining, right? Somebody comes to church, just shows up, nobody invited them, they just walk in off the street, completely unannounced, nobody knows them, and if they leave with nobody knowing them, they probably won't be back. Unless maybe they moved here and, they're looking for a good church, just like ours, and they read the website, know our doctrinal statement, and they think this is the only place we can go that's just like where we left, and so this is where we're going to be. There are those. But I'm just saying, for somebody who says, man, I really ought to go to church, it's their relationships that they make that's going to bring them back there. Right? Now, they may find the seat they sat in comfortable or uncomfortable. They may find the music was familiar or unfamiliar. They may, like the lighting, not the lighting. They may, like everything about it or not. But most of that is really immaterial for most people. If they can make a friend, if they can find somebody to connect with when they walk in the door, they'll likely come back. Now, some of those other things may play in more and more as they get further in their consideration, but if they find a place with people that are unfriendly, why would they go back? Just saying, relationships, and they provide, accountability for us. You hold me accountable. Did you realize that? Because if I show up here with some off-the-wall doctrinal message that I decided to go some other way with, somebody's going to say, Pastor, can we talk? Where did this come from? Somebody better, right? I'm counting on you. I'm counting on you. Right? Somebody disappears. Doesn't show back up after they've been here for a while. Somebody's going to call them or stop by and say, what's up? Where you at? You okay? You sick? Right? Relationship, accountability. Okay? Any other thoughts on that, sir?
Well, I can remember the first time we came to your church.
Uh-huh.
And we showed up no more than twice. I mean, it was once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we went up and visited my dad one weekend or something. And you called.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, we missed you. And I thought, no preacher's ever done that.
Hmm.
And that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
It also matters, like you said, when we first came up to this area, we went to a Baptist church and no one, not a soul spoke to us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not a pastor, not anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked out and I said, I don't want to go back there. They're not nice. And we never did.
Yeah, well,
It wasn't this church, obviously.
obviously. Uh-huh.
So it really does, like you told us to always speak to new people.
Uh-huh.
It really does make a difference.
Yeah, it can. There may be other things that factor in there, but if we're not friendly to them, they're certainly not going to be inclined to come back. And all right. Any other thoughts? Sir?
In verse 24, Hebrews 10 says, consider one another to provoke.
Mm-hmm.
In our day and age, when we think provoke, there's nothing positive about that.
Yeah.
Provoke
Well.
provoke to fight, provoke to argue, provoke the word.
Mm-hmm.
It does mean incitement.
Mm-hmm.
They could be too good. Dispute and anger, that we normally take the word to mean. But if you dig into it a little further, it means to sharpen alongside,
Mm.
to stir up.
Yeah. You mean like Proverbs 27:17? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that word provoke, it can mean provoke as in irritate, but that's not the only context in which it's used. It's used here to provoke to love and good works. Prompt people to do what's right. In other words, hold them accountable, which is why I chose that verse to represent that thought. And again, we don't like provoking and we don't like accountability today, all right? And I'm talking about in general, people don't like those things. They want to have their shallow and thin connections via the internet, where they don't really know me. They only know what I tell them about me. It's not close and personal enough to challenge me on anything, require anything of me. I can delete that or remove that connection at my discretion. And I guess the whole reason to bring this up is to say relationships are supposed to be deeper and stronger than that. We need relationships because we are facing a devil that is lying to us, and we are facing a world that is trying to destroy us and drag us down, and our flesh is cooperating with all of that. And that's why we need relationships to help us, excuse me, to encourage us and to hold us accountable. All right. How about Proverbs chapter 6? Excuse me. Something. Proverbs chapter 6. Let's consider another thought. Proverbs chapter 6. I have one here. Thank you. That may come in handy here in a second. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 20, down a little bit here. He says, "My son, keep thy father's commandment, forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually about thine heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee, and when thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. When thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. To keep thee from the evil woman," and on it goes. Basically to guard, to guide, direct. Can I just use this word? Relationships provide instruction. The instructions we need. And by the way, if you're not learning from other people's mistakes, you're making a big mistake. Did y'all hear what I just said? That, let's face it, nobody doesn't make mistakes. But if you're not aware of and observant to other people's mistakes, and not so you can club them or shun them, but so you can learn something. Yeah, maybe help them, maybe hold them accountable or whatever, but the reality is everybody makes mistakes. Not so that you can remove them from your friend list, delete them from your relationship, but, you know, again, that has a benefit. Even those, like she was saying about her mom, Ms. Tammy was saying about her mom and her friend, we can't just, that would not have been beneficial to remove that person, right? We need, and we can learn from other people's mistakes. Now, Miss Tammy's probably much wiser and doesn't hang out at other people's house all day long until they're absolutely sick and tired of seeing them, right? She probably doesn't do that, right? The Bible does say, "Withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house," blah, blah, blah. You know, so there's instruction in the Bible that tells us that there is a time to go home, right? But the point is, relationships provide this instruction, the law of your mother and the commandment of the father, and how they're to be bound, how we're supposed to really consider those things. Now, by the way, does the law of everyone's mother, is that right? Do all moms have the right law? Do all dads have the right commandments? No, but I'll say this. You should be leery and you should be cautious about discarding them, right? In other words, if you can prove, of course, scripturally, that commandment, that law is faulty, there would be a good reason to say, I'm not going to do that. Not delete your parent, but say, I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to learn from that didn't work and that doesn't apply and that's not the way it should be, and then I'm not going to repeat that. But did you not still get instruction from it? Hello? Right? Now, most of you know this, and I was raised in a smoking home, right? My parents smoked cigarettes from the time that they were, well, Dad was a preteen when he started smoking cigarettes. Of course, he died from lung cancer. What does that tell you? What does that teach you? Okay? and I'm not saying anything negative about my parents, I'm just helping you understand something. I've never put one to my lips. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you. Growing up, I looked around, even as a lost man, and go, yeah, there's something just not healthy about this, right? Yeah, right. When I go to the doctor and they say, have you ever smoked? I said, I've never put one on my lips, but secondhand, I got plenty. Right? Because the smoke cloud at my house was, well, I was a young person, so it was probably down right there. Just right here. Right? I'm just saying, right? When Mom and Dad finally quit, they said, and I was in construction, they said, son, can you come over and paint the ceiling? I said, I need a lot of primer for that. Right? So, what am I saying? I've learned something. I didn't learn how to something, I learned how not to something. Right? I don't want to give my kids that environment. And again, I'm not being negative or anything about my parents at all. Both of them figured it out and quit. But the point is, I learned something how not to do it. Right? I'm just giving you one example. Right? You can learn from your relationships. And you should. And if you don't, you're making a terrible mistake. Terrible mistake. Right? And just like Tammy's, mother, she learned a lot, and then in hindsight, she was so thankful for her. What if she'd have cut that off? What if she'd have run her out? Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? We need to not run people off so much, right? Even if we don't answer their phone calls all the time, right? And I've told you before, there's more than one person on I have their name programmed. I know where they live. I've gone to visit them. I instigated the relationship. But their phone doesn't ring for them anymore. I put them on the don't answer list, and it's just silenced. They can leave text messages and leave voicemails all they want. Usually I get 3 or 4 words into it and hit delete. Why? Because at this point in their life, I can't help them, and they are certainly not helping me. They don't want help, right? You can't help somebody who doesn't want it, no matter how hard you want it or how hard you try. So, am I deleting them? Nope. As soon as he leaves me a coherent message that is not involved in alcohol and profanity, I will call him back and stop visiting. If I see him in Walmart, I'll shake his hand, tell him I'm thinking about him. I think about him all the time, honestly. I pray for him all the time. But that doesn't mean I'm going to put myself in that environment, right? I'm not going to do it, right? Because I know it's not going to benefit him or me at this point. But I'm not going to cut him off, because I believe God might just bring that around sometime. And when God's ready, I'm ready. Okay? So, anyway, if you, okay, let me put it this way, rephrase that thought. How much would you know if it wasn't for other people? Huh?
Very little, because it starts as soon as you can learn everything.
Every single thing that you know, you learned from somebody else. There is not one thing that you know, either good or bad, that you did not learn from a relationship. Okay, so that's kind of how I want to close this session. That's how important relationships are, right? You're learning what not to do and what you should do, and they are beneficial, and they will help you if you understand that. And so don't just arbitrarily knock people off your friend list and your contact list, because relationships are very beneficial, all right? Relationships are designed by God to be a blessing. However, like everything else man has touched, relationships have been corrupted. right? So we need to be careful. Last week we looked at a verse in Proverbs, talked about sinners enticing us, okay? Not all relationships are equal. Not all relationships are good, and sometimes we have to limit those, or at least, and when I say limit, I don't mean eliminate, I mean limit, okay? Limit is different than eliminate, okay? So, you know, let me just say it this way, because our president-elect has taken a number of hits, along with a number of the people that he has said should be in his cabinet. They've taken a number of hits for the contacts that they have made with people. But I saw one reporter say, you know what? We should be talking to our enemies. We should be trying to understand them and get them to understand us. That's the only way we're going to resolve anything. If there's no dialogue, if there's no communication, if there's no relationship, what hope is there of ever resolving that difference? Right? So don't be so quick to cut people off. Right? If President Vladimir Putin called me this afternoon, I don't see any danger in that happening. I'm just saying, would I talk to him? I would. Would I try to influence him? I would. Would I accept an invitation to go visit with him? I would. I'd visit him in his palace if he'd let me, as long as I could bring this book. Vladimir Putin, if you're listening, you invite me and I'll come visit you and we'll sit and talk about this book. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for your love for us. Thank you for the relationships that you have created and built around us, for our helps, for our protection, for our blessing and benefit.